The frost on the corral rails looked like someone had sifted flour over the world, and every breath hung in the air as though reluctant to leave the lungs. The barn sat where it always had, weathered and patient, its boards the gray of river stones, edges warped so that slivers of the pale half-light slipped through. The roof had holes where the sky showed itself on rainy days, but it still stood solid against the wind. Smoke from the cabin chimney drifted in a lazy column, as if reluctant to leave the warmth inside. Jesse James walked from the cabin to the barn with the gait of a man who measured every step. His duster, once black, was now the color of the road. In one hand he carried a dented tin of coffee, in the other, a sack of oats. His boots left dark prints in the frost, marks that would vanish by mid-morning. His eyes were fixed on the barn, though not because he expected anything worth looking at. A man who had seen as much as Jesse didn't look for surprises. They found him on their own. Halfway there he caught the scent. Earth and wool, the familiar smell of the barn's morning air. But under it, something else. Metallic, faint, but sharp enough to catch at the back of his throat. Blood, cooled and old enough to have lost its brightness. His steps slowed. The barn door creaked when he pushed it open, hinges voicing years of neglect. A wedge of light cut across the dirt floor, stirring the dust into lazy spirals. The horses shifted in their stalls but didn't shy, their quiet telling him whatever was inside hadn't moved much. It was in the far stall that he saw them. A woman lay on her side in the straw, her dress torn and mud-dark at the hem. Her hair was tangled, heavy with dried sweat, and her arm was bound with a strip of linen gone stiff with blood. Around her were 7 children, their faces pale with cold, clothes threadbare and thin. The oldest boy, no taller than Jesse's ribs, stood in front of her with his chin lifted like he meant to stop the world from getting past him. No one spoke. The barn held its own breath. Somewhere, a horse stamped, the sound hollow against the wood. Jesse took in the scene without letting his gaze linger too long on any one face. He didn't ask who they were, where they'd come from, or why they were here. A man learns when not to ask. He set the oats on the feed bin, shrugged out of his coat, and placed it over the shoulders of the smallest girl. She flinched at the touch, then pulled it close around herself as if afraid it would be taken back. "You got names?" His voice was low, the words slow enough to land soft, though not gentle. Silence answered him. The woman's eyes opened, dark and watchful. She didn't look at him so much as through him, as if weighing what kind of trouble he was built for. In her right hand, pressed to her chest, she held a small wooden bird, its edges smoothed by years of turning it over. "You're bleeding," he said. It was not a question. She didn't deny it. "You'll stay warm first," he added. "Eat." He left, his boots crunching on the frost, and came back with half a loaf of bread and a tin cup of water. He set them down within reach and stepped back. The children took the bread the way the hungry always do, quick, quiet, breaking it into small pieces before it could be claimed by another hand. She drank slow, as though her throat needed time to remember how. The day passed without much movement. He kept them in the barn, lit the old stove in the tack room until the iron glowed, and brought in blankets that smelled faintly of cedar. The wind rose after sundown, whistling through the boards, but the animals were calm. One of the smaller girls curled up with her head against his knee as he sat on an upturned crate, the lantern casting soft shadows across her face. He didn't move her. By morning, he'd made a space for them in the cabin. She hesitated at the threshold, something like defiance flickering in her eyes, but he said only, "Barns for horses. You'll freeze." The cabin was small, 2 rooms and a loft, but warmer. The children wandered as if they'd stepped into a place they'd heard about but never seen. They touched everything. The chipped enamel plates, the worn handle of the kettle, the shelf with its faded photograph in a cracked frame. One boy noticed the way Jesse's left boot dragged a little when he walked. Another child, a girl of maybe 7, asked where his wife was. He didn't answer, just ladled beans into bowls. They ate with the quiet of people who know that words are a luxury. Only the crackle of the fire and the scrape of spoons filled the air. At one point, she looked at him, Just a glance, quick and steady. He held it. Something passed between them that didn't need naming. The peace didn't last. By the third day, the town knew. Word in a place like this traveled faster than weather. The preacher's wife came to the door, her face set in a polite mask, a basket of bread on her arm. She asked questions as though she were entitled to the answers. He let her speak until she was done, then closed the door with the bread still in her hands. Later, at the saloon, a man Jesse had once ridden with made sure everyone could hear when he said, you keep her trouble. And that's trouble you can't outrun." Jesse didn't look up from his coffee, but the mug stayed in his hand longer than it needed to. That night she packed, quiet as snowfall, folding the blankets they'd used, gathering the children's few belongings. Before the first light touched the horizon, they were gone. The barn felt hollow without them, the kind of empty that sits in your chest. In the cabin, the table was bare except for the wooden bird, wrapped in one of his old handkerchiefs. Days went by. He didn't ask after them in town. Pride, maybe, or the knowledge that finding them might only push them farther away. Then, one cold evening, the oldest boy appeared at the gate. His cheeks were raw from the wind, his breath coming hard. Without a word, he held out a folded scrap of paper. Inside was a charcoal drawing of Jesse's cabin, 8 figures standing in front of it. He found them in an abandoned freight shed on the edge of the next town. She was paler now, thinner, the hollowness in her eyes deeper. The children clustered close to her, their trust in her unshaken. "I left to keep you from the trouble I carry," she said. He crouched, meeting her eyes. "We don't need fixing, just a place to belong." Her hand tightened on the wooden bird. He didn't wait for her answer. He lifted the smallest child into his arms and started toward the wagon. The others fell in behind him without a sound. She stayed in the doorway for a long moment, the cold pressing against her back. Then she stepped into the frost and followed. The ride back was quiet but not empty. The sound of the wagon wheels over frozen ground had a rhythm to it, steady and sure. When the cabin came into sight, the first light of dawn was breaking, gold spilling through the warped slats of the barn. Smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, he pulled out a chair for her at the table. She sat, her hands trembling. The smallest girl reached into her pocket and set the wooden bird in the center of the table. "For the new nest," she whispered. Outside, the church bell in town carried on the wind. Inside, the air shifted warmer now, as if the walls themselves had taken a deeper breath. Somewhere beyond the hills, someone else had heard that Jesse James was keeping a woman and 7 children under his roof. "Not all who come will bring bread,"